Good evening, everyone. My name is Dundrup. I'm the SBC here at Tibetan Norbeling. I wanted to apologize for my absence and welcome Venerable Kartsön to this module of Discovering Buddhism, Introduction to Tantra, which he will be very ably leading everyone through for the next 6 weeks. Venerable Kartsön has been a very important part of our online faculty for a number of years now. He has trained as an interpreter and a translator for many years in Australia, and he's given teachings all around the world. I heard just recently he was interpreting for Ling Rinpoche. So he has a very storied career within FPMT, and within our center, he has provided a number of invaluable teachings, and we hope very much that this is only the beginning of many, many years of additional teachings. This particular module requires skill in order to present well, and so I was very pleased when Venerable Kartsön accepted the invitation to teach this in particular. So thank you, Venerable Kartsön, and everyone. I know that you will benefit immensely from the next 6 weeks of teachings. So over to you, Venerable Kartsön. Thank you again very, very much.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you. And so, shall we jump straight into it? All right. So, just for the sake of people who haven't seen me before, maybe I'm just going to say a few words about myself, and then we're going to start with this module. And so, as Venerable Dundrup said, my name is Kartsön, which is a contraction of Karma Tsundru. I was born in Israel, grew up in Israel. I got into Buddhism in my mid-20s when I was traveling in India for the first time. And then I started to go deeper and deeper into the Buddhist tradition. And when I was 30, I left my job in Israel as a software engineer and went to India again, thinking that I'll be there for a few months. But then I met someone that later on became one of my teachers. I then took up Tibetan language. I ended up staying in India for 4 years. One thing led to another. And then I got a request to join the ranks of Chenrezig Institute in Australia. So I jumped on a plane, made it to Australia, and I came in with a commitment for a couple of years. But then I ended up staying for 18 years at Chenrezig Institute. And for the past few years, I've been traveling around between Australia and India and Taiwan and China and Israel and other places for teachings, for retreats, for teaching, translating. So that's me. Over the years, as Vendrudrumba said, I have participated in a few courses together with Thupten Nobeling Center. And so I know some of the wonderful people of Thupten Nobeling Center. It's a really interesting, vibrant, very active and dynamic platform for sharing the teachings of the Buddha and mainly working on our minds. So whenever Dundrubla contacts me, I check my schedule, see where I am in the world, see if the timing will suit my sleeping routine. And yeah, I'm happy to do it again. And so this time round, we're going to look at an introduction to Tantra, which is, I think, one of the, maybe for me, most challenging modules to think of, just in terms of finding the balance, how deep we will go into Tantra, and how will it still be palatable in keeping it in a general sense. And so, since this is part of the Introduction to Buddhism, Discovering Buddhism, I think, program, there's no assumption that, at least from my side, that everyone would look at themselves as completely converted, fully blown Buddhist practitioners. Maybe some of you are still checking out the Buddhist path. Maybe some of you are still checking out whether this path works for you. And so if at some point some of the things that I say seem to you to be too Buddhist, too religious, too big for you, then don't worry about it. There's no expectation that all of us will take on board all those teachings and immediately put them into practice. We want to be exposed to the different range of Buddhist practices, the different extents of Buddhist practices. We often say in Buddhism that the followers of the Buddha, at the time of the Buddha, were of different dispositions. And for that reason, the Buddha gave 84,000 discourses, 84,000 teachings addressing the needs and sets of beliefs and social structure and imprints and so on and so forth of his followers at the time. So it goes without saying that we, coming from such a vast difference in terms of geography and cultural conditioning and historical conditioning, social conditioning, and so on and so forth, needless to say that for us also, we'll have a wide range of responses or reactions to the teachings of the Buddha. But nonetheless, since I myself am a Buddhist monk, and we're here drawing from the Buddhist traditions, we're going to do it. We're going to engage with that with some form of Buddhist setup, and so we'll try to find balance between what works for us and what works for everyone. Also, over the next 6 weeks, we, as we meet every week, we're going to touch upon a list of points taken from the Buddhist tradition. So if at any given time you have any question, any doubts, you would like me to clarify something, if you would like me to repeat some of the things that I say, I have a foreign accent, so not always it is clear to everyone. If you have any question, just put your hand up. You can unmute yourself, and we're going to have a direct discussion. So maybe we will start this session with correcting our motivation to begin with. I'm just wondering, can you hear me clearly? All right, cool. All right. And so as we start with correcting your motivation, the way that I normally sit for my own personal meditation sessions or practices is I first of all make sure that my body feels completely at ease, completely relaxed, that I feel comfortable within my body and mind. So I take a few seconds, sometimes a minute, just to create that space within my body and mind. And then after that, I switch my focus to observing my breath. And normally I count a round of 21 breaths. This is something that I got used to with meditations with one of my teachers, my ordination master, Tai Situ Rinpoche. And so it's quite useful to use a breathing process just as a way of centering our mind, focusing our mind. And within 21 breaths, I try to observe breathing out, transitioning to breathing in, and then transitioning to breathing out. That's one breath. And I do it for 21 times. And so we will do it together, if you don't mind. And then we will correct the motivation. We will correct the motivation with refuge and bodhicitta. And as I said, there's no expectation that all of you will necessarily see yourself as Buddhist. So although we will recite the verse for refuge and bodhicitta, you can just think that you are going to open your mind, try to find techniques and ways of thinking that will benefit you in this life. And if they're going to benefit you in this life, they will also likely to be helpful to those around you. If you can improve your mind and your interactions with others to be of benefit to others, benefit to yourself, less detrimental to others, less detrimental to yourself, it's going to be a win-win situation for yourself and others. So that's that's a general way of thinking if you see yourself as non-Buddhist. And as Buddhists, we will correct the mind with refuge in bodhicitta, thinking that we're going to rely upon the teachings of the Buddha, not focusing mainly on what we can get from our practice in this life, making our life more comfortable and easy. That's a very good byproduct of our practice, but focusing mainly on how we can make our mind perfect, completely release it from all its limitation, and make it a mind that can be of perfect benefit to ourselves and all other living beings. But first thing first, let's find that space within ourselves, within our body and mind, and find some relaxation, taking a few seconds to do that. Making sure that there is no tension in our body, and keeping our back loosely straight, not rigid, not too tense, but also not slouching, loosely straight. And we're going to turn our attention to the breathing cycle, counting a round of 21 breaths. Cultivating mindfulness and vigilance. And mindfulness is remembering the breath. And vigilance is monitoring our mind every breath, or 2 or 3, making sure that we're still following the breathing process without being too rigid, too tense, too intense, but also without forgetting the breathing process. Finding a fun balance for 21 breaths. And at the beginning of this Discovering Buddhism module, in correcting a motivation, thinking that all of us have been trying to find ways to cope with the challenges and difficulties, the stress in our life, trying to find meaning and satisfaction, recognizing that focusing only on the sensorial or material level will not bring us long-term happiness and satisfaction. And also recognizing that death is approaching. And what lies beyond is unclear to us, unknown to us. And if indeed future lifetimes exist, how wonderful it would be if we could once again find optimal conditions for encountering the Dharma, encountering spiritual teachers. How wonderful it would be if we will have all the conducive conditions, perfect circumstances that will allow us not only to take care of our daily needs, but also to continue to develop our mind. But still recognizing that any state that we find ourselves within samsara, in which we are still bound by ignorance, by anger, aggression, hostility, attachment, jealousy, pride, divisiveness. So long as our mind is limited by such afflictive states of mind, there will never be long-term happiness and satisfaction and well-being. And so thinking that my goal is to completely break free from all samsaric circumstances. To attain the state of liberation from ignorance, from anger, from attachment, from jealousy, from pride, from dissatisfaction. To completely eliminate all afflictive states of mind rooted in ignorance and become free. But even more than that, thinking that all living beings around them are in the same boat, experiencing unsought suffering and striving for ultimate happiness and yet failing to find any happiness, long-term happiness and satisfaction within samsara. And all those living beings around me depend upon me and I depend upon them. We've been connected for many lifetimes in a family relationship. We're friends, acquaintances. We protected each other, loved each other. And even though we cannot remember all those relationships, mirrored relationships, we can still think that if I'm connected to so many living beings in this life, it is very likely that I was connected with myriad living beings in some without beginning and up until now. So we think that we're going to make our mind perfect, completely limitless, with perfect qualities, not only for our sake, but for the sake of everyone else. And to do so, we're going to rely upon the Buddha as a teacher. The Buddha that started off as being an ordinary being just like us. but I found a way to completely eliminate, purge all afflictive states of mind, all limitations. And what we are going to rely upon the Dhamma is the actual protection, mental protection. The Buddha, a Buddha, cannot remove our obscurations, our afflictions, just like dusting or cleaning or wiping clean a surface. But if we were to practice the Dhamma and develop it in our own mind stream, we will get protection from anger, attachment, ignorance, limitations. And so we find confidence in our ability to practice the Dhamma. And also a sense of reliance upon the Sangha. Not just ordained people, but those exalted beings that show us the way to study, to reflect, and meditate. They mediate the teachings of the Buddha. They communicate it to us, showing us the way to completely make our mind perfect. And so with that sense of reliance, we think, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, then I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, then I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. All right. And so, first off, let's look at the list of points and topics that I would like to cover in the next few weeks. Just a second. Let's see what I'm looking. Okay. So first off, I wanted to start today. This is what we'll do today. Look at the foundation of all good qualities and the three principal aspects of the path is presented by the great master Lama Tsongkhapa. Towards the end of the text, at least the foundation of all good qualities, he indicates what we should be doing, the way that we should approach our tantric practice. So we'll use that as an introduction. Then today we're going to look at the meaning of practicing Tantra. Then we're going to look at how to enter the tantric path. What is the need to do it? How do we do that? Later on, we're going to look at the common paths. We're going to do it, I think, next week, being renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. And I thought of also spending a considerable amount of time in the next session, maybe even today, let's see how it works, in meditating on renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness, for their vital as common paths, common to both Sutra and Tantra. So we will do that as well. We're going to look at the meaning of receiving an empowerment, speak of Guru devotion, both in Sutra and Tantra. Then we're going to have a close look at the 4 classes of Tantra. We're going to look at what makes Tantra a quick path, particularly in comparison with the Sutra path, right? Because often we speak of Sutra and Tantra. So what makes Tantra a quick path? We're going to look at that. And then towards the end of the module, I thought of introducing a simple practice, the practice of Vajrayana, and to touch upon combining some of the key points of practicing Tantra and the way to approach them in my mind. So I thought of doing it in the last session of our module. How does it sound? Cool. And so, let's see. All right. So first of all, this module is a part of the FMT's Discovering Buddhism program, and we have here an invitation to explore the Vajrayana path, the foundation, the methods, and the promise for swift awakening as we consider the tantric path to be a quick path. And we begin, first of all, with the foundation of all good qualities. So before we're going to look at the three principal aspects of the path, let's look at Tsongkhapa's Lamrim text that explains the steps of the path to enlightenment. And so before we do that, just a note on Tsongkhapa for those, I think that probably most of you, if not all of you, have heard of Lama Tsongkhapa. Tsongkhapa was a Tibetan master that had founded the Gelug tradition, which now is the most extensive, biggest Tibetan Buddhist tradition existing in Tibet, but also, I guess, like in terms of Tibetan Buddhism around the world, it's the biggest one. And so Tsongkhapa studied with teachers from other traditions, obviously, because the Gelug tradition was not around when Lama Tsongkhapa was around. But he studied with Kagyu teachers, with Sakya teachers. And having done extensive study and becoming such a massive yogi, practitioner, scholar, he composed different texts explaining the stages of the path to enlightenment, which are based on Atisha's presentation, The Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. So Atisha made his way to Tibet in the 10th or 11th century upon an invitation of a king from Western Tibet. And the life story of Atisha is quite exotic, I might say. Tibetans have a way of embellishing old stories with fantastic tales. And it's like Harry Potter of the Asian region. Anyway, when Atisha was making his way from India to Tibet, probably on a horseback, he was getting messages from his monastery, Nalanda Monastery, that he should come back to the monastery, he should continue with his work, he should get back to his responsibilities. And in return, he sent them back a new text that he composed, The Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, which was the first Lamrim teaching that were ever written. So prior to the time of Atisha, there were, of course, lots of Buddhist texts around. There were texts that compiled the teachings of the Buddha, which are now called in the Tibetan language, the Kangyur, the words of the Buddha. And there were also ample Indian commentaries that were composed based on the teachings of the Buddha. But those commentaries and those teachings were dealing with different sections of the teachings. I wouldn't say divorced from each other, but not putting them together. So there was a section of teaching dealing with the philosophical view. There was a section of the teachings dealing with the stages of the method path. There was the path of the teachings that were dealing with Vinaya. There were parts of the teachings that were dealing with logic. Atisha was the first one who drew from those myriad sources, many sources, and presented them in a unified text called The Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, detailing how a single practitioner would follow all the steps to enlightenment right from the beginning all the way to its end. And so that was the first Lamrim text to be composed. And then Tsongkhapa took this text as a basis and composed different extents of Lamrim texts. So we have, I guess, one of the most famous works of Tsongkhapa is called in Tibetan the Lamrim Chemo, the great exposition on the graduate path to enlightenment. He also composed a middling presentation and many texts that detail in a very succinct way the steps of the path to enlightenment. So we have hymns of experience, the foundation of all good qualities, the three principal aspects of the path. All of them are Lamrim texts. So one of them is the foundation of all good quality, a short presentation of the steps of the path to enlightenment, in which Tsongkhapa begins with, first of all, saying that the basis of all good qualities we will obtain in this and future lives is the Venerable Guru, here teaching us the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher in a very common way. From the point of view of the sutra perspective, it says correct devotion to him is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. So, in general, I think that Tsongkhapa was speaking to a community of Buddhists. For them, they took for granted that the basis for all spiritual attainments here and hereafter is a proper reliance upon a spiritual teacher. We start in a different way, most of us. I did not grow up Buddhist. I came across Buddhism when I was in my mid-20s, some 30 years back. And so the initial relationship that I had with Tibetan Buddhism and also the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher was to tread carefully. Some of the things seem to be too full on for me, too religious, too devotional. And so studying a Lamrim teaching with an extensive presentation of how to rely upon a spiritual teacher, seeing the Lama as Buddha, and so on and so forth, did not really work for me. So we need to keep it in mind sometimes if we develop some resistance in our mind that such teachings were given to a community of Buddhists. So it will work for us to a certain extent, and we can always go back to those topics and find new meanings for us later on, right? So there's no expectation that we'll go head over heels with religious revelation, epiphanies, right from the beginning with the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. And so, nonetheless, here Tsongkhapa says that reliance upon the spiritual teacher is the root of the path. And then he goes into, in verse number 2, into an encouragement, exhortation to make the most out of our precious human rebirth. Understanding that this precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once is greatly meaningful and is difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. And then he continues in saying, when we think of the way that we extract the most meaningful essence of our life, we begin with the sense of the path of those of the small scope, which begins with contemplating death and impermanence. This life is an impermanent as a water bottle. Remember how quickly decay and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follows. So I'm now in my mid-50s. And when I think of how many years I still have ahead of me, I think that my mom died when she was 68 years old. I hope to outdo my mom. But who knows? My dad passed away when he was 80. Both of them had, and I would say somewhat unhealthy lifestyle. They were smoking, they were overweight, they didn't do the right thing. I hope that I will remain longer, but you can never know. I might stay for 20 more years, 30 more years, but it might be also next week or next month. And so here Tsongkhapa encourages us, in light of our delicate situation, to make the most out of this lifetime. And he also says that after death, the body will be left behind, all our possessions, all the relationships that we had with others in this lifetime, all our possessions, all the things that held a certain significance to our life in this lifetime. All of them will be left behind. And the thing that will continue with us to next lifetime is our karma. Here it says, black and white karma follows. By the way, when I started translating in Australia, Australia is a multicultural society. So we have people from different places, different ethnicities. In Tibetan, when they speak about black and white karma, they speak about in relation to negative and positive actions. And I don't know if I'm too sensitive about black and white karma, but since I'm kind of describing colors too, they might be sensitive to some people. So sometimes I just say positive and negative actions. So if it bothers you, sometimes it used to bother me. Don't worry about it, just words. And so then this lifetime to the next. And so we then want to make sure that we behave in a careful way as much as we can, taking karma into consideration. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, Tsongkhapa says, please bless me to always be careful to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. And then, so what it means to say is that if upon our death, negative karma will come to fruition, our mind will be governed by a negative state of mind. It will lead us to a miserable state of rebirth in the next lifetime. And let alone not being able to, again, meet the Dharma, meet the teaching, meet spiritual teachers, continue to develop our mind, our experience would be an experience of great suffering. So we don't want that. We want to not only become free from a miserable state of rebirth in the next lifetime, but we also want to enjoy the wide range of circumstances to make the most out of our life also in the next lifetime. So in order to do so, we need to observe our karma. We need to be careful about the things that we do. As Tsongkhapa says, to abandon negative karma as much as we can and to cultivate positive karma. But then it says that then moving on to the path of those of the medium scope, it's not enough. It's not going to cut it, because even if we're going to be born again as human beings with optimal circumstances, our life again will be short. When someone that lives for 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, for us seems to be someone that had lived a very long life. But actually, when you think about millions of years, or at least the thousands of years, dozens of thousands of years in which humanity have developed on this planet, was 50 years, 60 years, 100 years, are not such a long time, actually quite short. And not only that, when we think of having to do it again and again and again, to be born and develop, go through teenage angst, and then again strive in our relationship and accumulate possessions and secure a career and work on our social standing and so on and so forth. It's just tiring to do it again and again and again, and still all along looking for long-term happiness and satisfaction. So through that, we start to think of samsaric drawbacks. So Tsongkhapa here says, seeking samsaric pleasure is the door to all sufferings. They are uncertain and cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation, which means please bless me to generate renunciation, the strong wish for the bliss of liberation. But to be determined to completely live cyclic existence is not enough. We also need to make sure that we do everything possible in order to break free from cyclic existence. And so here in verse 6, Tsongkhapa says, led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping the pratimoksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. So here it teaches us to not only train in ethics, but also implicitly training concentration and training wisdom and concentration in order to be able to completely break free from the prison of samsara. And then in verse 7, he encourages us to go on and develop bodhicitta, following the steps of the path of the great scope. And it says, just as I'm falling into the sea of samsara. So of all mother migratory beings, please bless them to see this, train in supreme bodhicitta, and bear the responsibility of freeing migratory beings. And in verse 8, he continues in encouraging us to put into practice the 6 perfections, beginning with more, the 6 perfections we begin with generosity, but also morality is crucial. So even if I develop only bodhicitta, but I don't practice the 3 types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the bodhisattva vows with great energy. And then he speaks about developing the union of karma abiding with special insight, shamatha and vipassana. First of all, with shamatha, once I've pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified path of karma abiding and special insight. So that's a preparation from Tantra up until now. And then in verse 10, he indicates that when we have done all that legwork from the beginning, having trained our mind in the steps of the path of enlightenment, we render ourselves as to become pure vessel for training in the Vajrayana. So having become a pure vessel, by training in the general path, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. The Vajra vehicle is Tantra, the Vajrayana. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the 2 attainments is keeping pure vows and samaya. As I've become fairly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. And so this is where I want to start with the foundation for good qualities, particularly indicating or emphasizing the importance of verse 10. Having become a pure vessel, but training in the general path, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicles. And so what Lama Tsongkhapa says here is basically hold your horses. Hold your horses, don't rush into Tantra. Don't rush into your tantric practice. Having become a pure vessel, then comes the time to enter into the tantric path. Having said that, Tibetan Buddhism is somewhat confusing. We get mixed messages, and we work our way through those mixed messages as we go along, with a process of trial and error, and hopefully things will work well. And so, on one hand, we're being told, once you've trained in a general path, once you've trained in the Lamrim, then comes the time to enter into the tantric path, the tantric method. However, whenever we have a lama in our vicinity and they give a tantric empowerment, tantric ritual, there's such a great emphasis and encouragement to take the empowerment, even if we're not ready to do so. And there is a certain lingo that we use. We place so many imprints upon a mind stream when we attend an empowerment. And even if we don't practice Tantra in a good, in a solid way, in a pure way, even if an impure practice of Tantra can lead to a miserable state of rebirth in our next lifetime, it's such an amazing opportunity for, amongst the 1,002 Buddhas that will appear in this fortunate eon, only 4 of them will teach the Tantra and so on and so forth. So it's such an amazing and rare opportunity. So we get mixed messages, right? And so how do we navigate our way? I don't have any solution. I don't have any kind of any clear idea, but I think that probably continuing to strengthen the foundation of both the sutra system, and if we already find ourselves in a kind of practicing certain rituals or certain practices, certain tantric meditation, so do that, but also make sure that we continue to develop the stairs of the path, the Namring path, to build a more solid, a comfortable, and useful, and enriching, and full-blown foundation for the practice of Tantra. Now, when I, when I encountered the Buddhist tradition during my first trip to India, I was very inspired by some of the things that I read and a couple of teachings that I got, and I started traveling to India whenever I could, every year, to receive some more teachings from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and I attended teachings at the Tibetan Library of Works and Archives. And then I started attending teachings of Buddhist monks and nuns, mostly from the FPMT circle, that were visiting Israel from time to time. So I didn't do much with Tantra. Then I left my job in Israel, as I said, and that was at the beginning of the 2000s, the year 2000, and I went to India with the idea of staying there for a few months, and then I got in love. I fell in love with someone. We didn't know, a woman from Ireland, and we ended up staying in India together for 2 years. And I took up Tibetan language. Then I stayed for 2 more years. One thing led to another, as I said. And then I got invited to Australia to take up the position of the interpreter for Chenrezig Institute. And all along, I had nothing to do with Tantra, in the sense that at the beginning, I think that my relationship with Tantra was looking at it as a form of idol worshipping, doing voodoo. So I thought to myself, I don't need to get involved with that. There's ample other things that I can do, other things that I can practice that benefit my mind. And in 2005, as far as I remember, 2005, I arrived in Australia at Chenrezig Institute, and I arrived into the center when we had Geshe Tsering, and Geshe Tashi Tsering had lived at the time at the center for 15 years or 18 years. He was already old. I mean, he was 70, so sorry. He was not old. I don't know. Sometimes when I said I feel that I'm 55, I feel old. I feel that some people feel offended. So anyway, it was getting older. It was 70. And I arrived in Australia together with the new Geshe. We had a really vibrant and amazing spiritual program. So I went to see Geshe Tashi Tsering the second day after my arrival. And then he said, so we are going to study a module on High Yoga Tantra, and then a commentary to the practice of Yamantaka, Vajrayana. Have you got the empowerment? And I said, no, I don't have the empowerment of Yamantaka. I said, that's great, because tomorrow I'm giving the empowerment to Yamantaka Vajrayana. And so I was pretty brash at the time. And I said, no, actually, I don't want to take the empowerment. You can't, with a state of mind that you can't make me take the empowerment, because I don't want to practice Tantra. And so Geshe Tashi kind of leaned back and he said, well, it's completely up to you. I can't force you to do anything. We didn't have a standoff. It was kind of with a smile on our face. But he said, I can't force you to do anything, but just know that you came to Australia together with a new Geshe. the plan for you for the next 4 months is to teach, first of all, a module on Hatha Yoga Tantra, and then a commentary to Yamantaka. And we have 70 people that are booked in and are going to stay at the center. And so if you're not going to do that, then the teachings will not go ahead. But it's completely up to you. Yeah, it's completely up to you to decide. I'm not forcing you. So of course, the next day I sat in the Gompa together with everyone and received the empowerment. And so I've taken the empowerment, and actually I found out that the Buddhist teachings, the Buddhist path, so profound. Now I'm glad that kind of I was forced to do that. It is profound, but I wasn't ready for that. I didn't have the kind of a strong backbone of the Lam Rinpa. And so over the years, I started strengthening those two parts. You cannot have a solid tantric practice without a strong foundation in sutra. And that being the case, since here, if I go back to what Tsongkhapa says here, having become a pure vessel by training in the general path, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. So the general path is a path consisting of the three principal aspects of the path, which were presented again by Tsongkhapa in another text, miraculously called the three principal aspects of the path, which begin in a similar fashion to the foundation of all good qualities. Beginning with relying upon a spiritual teacher, I bow down to my perfect gurus. And then after, the setup of the scene for the text, the promise to compose and persuading us to listen to the teachings, Tsongkhapa launches into developing renunciation, the utmost determination to live cyclic existence. Then he goes into the second principle, which is the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta. And then he goes into meditating on the right view, the correct view, the view of emptiness. So explained in this text the three principal aspects of the path, which are, you can say, unanimously taken to be the common paths, which are required as practices, as qualities, in order to engage with the tantric teachings. So going back to something that I said a few minutes ago, Tibetan Buddhism gives us sometimes, or teachers, communities, Buddhist centers, the whole vibe around us, sometimes gives us mixed messages. You have to train in renunciation, in bodhicitta, in the correct view, as a platform for training in Tantra, entering the tantric path. But then if there is a Lama around and they give an empowerment, particularly if it's someone like His Honesty Dalai Lama or many of those great Lamas that travel around the FMT universe, Ling Rinpoche, Selko Rinpoche, Selko Tsenchel Rinpoche, and other teachers. It's so rare for us to meet such incredible spiritual teachers, particularly considering our circumstances. We live so far away in terms of physical distance from the heart of Tibetan Buddhism, from the great monasteries, great institutions. It takes quite a lot of resources and organizing skills to put together a tour of someone like that. And when would be the next time that we'd be able to do something like that? Who knows? So if they're already in the vicinity, we're encouraged to go and take an empowerment. So working on this in parallel is essential. And so then I want to go back to the topics that I wanted to cover on this. Topics that I wanted to look at together with you guys. So we spoke today, up until now, of the foundation of all good qualities, in which Tsongkhapa says that having covered the common parts, it's time to enter into the tantric vehicle. Then I spoke of the three principal aspects of the path, which give us a more specific indication of what would be the common parts: renunciation, bodhicitta, and the view of emptiness. And now I would like to go into the meaning of practicing Tantra. Why do we need to do that? What is the meaning of Tantra? What is the purpose of Tantra? And so on and so forth. But before that, I see that Joey and Freddie, one of you, put your hand up. Can you unmute yourself?
So could you explain, please, what in this context does empowerment mean? What is it?
So actually, it is one of the topics that I intend to cover more at length. I don't know if next week, but probably the week after that. But just since you asked, I'm just going to maybe give like a really general and short explanation. We're going to speak about it more elaborately later on. But an empowerment is a permission. It's a permission to practice Tantra. To me, no, it was never stated like that. I've never heard it spoken of like that from my Tibetan Buddhist teachers or lamas, Tibetan lamas. But I think of it as a fail-safe mechanism, in a sense that a lama should be evaluating us to see whether we are ready to practice Tantra. And once we are ready, once they deem us ready to practice Tantra, they give us an empowerment. It's like an official permission to practice the Tantra. That's in general, I think. But then more specifically, when you look at the actual ritual that is involved with the tantric empowerment, there are certain things that happen in the course of empowerment that should infuse our mind with some potentials that will ripen our mind to the practice of Tantra. So all of that is happening through the course of empowerment, including also giving us some vows, some pledges, and so on and so forth. So all of that is done in an official ceremony, which is giving us a permission to practice Tantra or practice a particular deity practice. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. Michelle?
Yes. Thank you for acknowledging the mixed signals. I feel like I definitely have felt that on my path. Where I get confused is the imprint versus taking the empowerments, and then particularly at Kopan, I've been there several times. I keep hearing you shouldn't enter the Tantra path without having like a root guru or a root teacher. And that's probably where I get like those mixed signals, like you said, because every time I go back, I've been back 4 times. It's that getting caught up in, oh, you want to do this, or oh, you should do this. But then I go, I don't have a teacher. I live in an area where I'm online hunting for my Sangha. I'm hunting. So I get really confused. And should I be looking for the imprints, or because I feel the strong pull to take an empowerment, which I haven't yet? How do I balance that? Or what is your suggestion?
All right. And so one of the topics that I also am planning to cover is guru devotion in Sutra and Tantra, the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher in Sutra and Tantra, and how to find a teacher, what would be the relationship between ourselves and the teacher. So I will, again, go into greater details when I look at this topic later on. But again, just to give a general answer for that, beggars cannot be choosers in some sense, in that As exactly no, as you said that you live in an area that is far away from the hub of Tibetan Buddhism, very difficult to come across teachers, to come across the Sangha. How do we find our own spiritual teacher? Well, that's a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us. In Tibetan Buddhism also, I think mainly we get, pressured into thinking that if we don't have a spiritual teacher, if we haven't found a teacher, there's absolutely no way that we can progress along the path. So our first priority, first and foremost, should be finding a spiritual teacher. I mean, we get that from, first of all, from the Lamrim text. It says, the foundation of all good qualities is a solid reliance upon a spiritual teacher. That's at the very beginning of the text. And then we come across Tibetan masters, Tibetan teachers that also emphasize the importance of relying upon a spiritual teacher. And so, it's confusing because we don't have the facilities to really study and learn and develop the skills and means to find our own spiritual teachers. We don't have the facilities because we live far away from the Tibetan hub. And so over the years, in my first few years or first decade, let's say, of being involved with Tibetan Buddhism, I always felt inadequate or pressured into finding a spiritual teacher. Otherwise, I thought I would not be able to progress. But then actually, only after you give yourself the time to study, learn, develop knowledge, develop skills, then you develop an ability to have a correct assessment, or let's say, not maybe correct assessment is not the right word, the right term, but you have a better ability to consider who will be a teacher, or what would be the defining characteristics of a teacher that will be suitable to your situation. And so at some point, I then became more committed to a couple of teachers, at least 2 or 3 teachers that I felt really connected with, but that took time. And so what I'm saying is that there are also mixed messages that we get in reliance upon not being able to progress without a spiritual teacher. And yet, to find a spiritual teacher, you need to have enough knowledge, you need to have done enough study and enough, meditation and practice to really know what should be the qualities of a spiritual teacher, and particularly who will be a spiritual teacher that will suit your own particular disposition. So that's in general. But also more specifically, we have different ways in which a teacher or a certain person becomes a spiritual teacher. We can have a few spiritual teachers. We can rely upon a few teachers. There is sometimes a heart connection, a deep sense of trust with one Lama that arises in our mind through listening to the teachings, encountering them, coming to know the qualities. So that's one way, thinking that in the future, these are the qualities that I want to embody. So that's one way. But also when we get vows from one person, be it a refuge vow or the bodhisattva vow, or we get ordination, we receive ordination, or we receive the tantric vow, that person also becomes a teacher that we rely upon just because they've given us a vow. Needless to say that when I became ordained with Taisita Rinpoche became one of my main teachers. Many people in the FKMT were ordained by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And so when you become ordained with someone like that, it's not that you can, pick up the phone and call him and ask personal question. It's not that you can call him and say, I'm currently, I have some challenges in my life. Could you help me? I'm going through depression. Please help me. Or, you cannot say, I'm thinking of leaving my job and going into retreat or taking on another job. What would be the best thing for me to do? Maybe in a random chance you might pass on a message to his honest and get an answer. But for most of us, most humans, it's impossible. And so we rely upon someone like him, but actually the relationship is quite, the nature of the relationship is quite different to a teacher that lives within, let's say, a Buddhist center within the FMT mandala. And then also we have a teacher that gives us empowerment. That also is a teacher that becomes a teacher that we need to rely upon, the Vajra master. We will speak about it more at length in a few weeks. And so going back to your question, Michelle, can you take an empowerment without having a spiritual teacher? I'd say that you can. Maybe it's not ideal in the sense that, when you have a spiritual teacher that knows you, that can give you some directions, that can also maybe have a better judgment or assessment whether the person giving you an empowerment is a fully qualified spiritual teacher or tantric master. Then you get help and support, and you also can have the follow-up after you've taken an empowerment. But then, as I said before, beggars cannot be choosers sometimes. These are the opportunities that we have at hand. So don't rush into taking empowerments with people that you don't know. Do your own research. One of the things that I often do when I hear about a new teacher, or when I been asked to translate for a new person, or when someone's telling me about a new teacher, I just go online and search the name of the teacher together with controversy, together with allegation. That's a kind of really good starting point to see whether there are some alarm bells that could come up in our mind. Let's say now with internet we have a better way of assessing whether we protect ourselves in a suitable way. Anyway, so taking empowerments with, let's say, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, taking empowerments at Kopan, if you're visiting Kopan, I think that we can take for granted that there is already a certain ring of protection that is placed around us, because those institutions would not promote teachers which are not right, which are not qualified. So that maybe, Michelle, that's what I can say now, but let's continue to think about it. And I think that maybe in the third or fourth week of this module, we will look more closely at relying upon a tantric teacher and finding a tantric teacher and so on and so forth. So maybe some of the points will be flashed again, and we'll go deeper into some of those points. How does it sound? All right. Susan, my dear, long time no see. How are you? If you could unmute yourself.
I can't. There. Okay, now.
Oh, cool.
Yes, nice to see you. Thank you, Venerable. I was wondering if you could just very briefly define some other common but yet specialized terms so that everybody can follow, including me. Because sometimes some of them seem almost like the same. For instance, in the phrase, the supreme Vajra vehicle is Tantra. Tantra and Vajra, like somehow being like the same. Yet I would like to know what distinguishes them from each other. And the terms that in particular I'm thinking of are Tantra, Sutra, as in Tantra versus Sutra, and then Vajrayana and Vajrasattva and Lamrim. Could you just super briefly distinguish those terms from each other?
All right. And so thank you, Susan. Your question is totally timely, spot on, because, the next thing that I wanted to touch upon in our meeting today, let's look at that, is what is the meaning of practicing Tantra? So Tantra, the secret mantra, Vajrayana. So these are the points that I wanted to speak of now. And so in general, when we look at the way of classifying the different paths that the Buddha taught, that the Buddha laid out for us, we can divide those paths into Mahayana and Hinayana. Mahayana being the great vehicle, and Hinayana being, this is a really complicated term, or not complicated, challenging term. In English, I think that just because the limitation of the language, of course, although it's such a rich and developed language, a way of translating the word Hinayana into English is as the small vehicle or the lesser vehicle. It sounds a little bit pejorative, a little bit undermining. But when Tibetan teachers or Tibetan Buddhism explain the difference between Mahayana and Hinayana, they often say that small and big, the great vehicle or the big vehicle and the small vehicle, have to do with the perspective that you adopt over your spiritual practice. You either have a smaller perspective, which does not make your practice become irrelevant or weak or inferior, but you're concerned about, when you're concerned mainly about wanting to live samsara and attain the state of liberation, just for your own sake, your kind of your perspective, the prism of your mind is kind of smaller. So it is called Hinayana. And when you're concerned not about your own welfare only, but for the welfare of everyone else, wanting to free everyone else from samsara, the state of mind become more extensive. That's the great vehicle. So they're not arranged as great and inferior in terms of good and bad. They're called big and small, or greater and lesser, just from the perspective of your spiritual goal. Now, if you're a Hinayana practitioner and you want to attain the state of liberation, just for your own sake, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not bad. It's not negative. Any Hinayana practitioner needs to develop wisdom. They need to develop non-harmfulness, which is based on love and compassion. Any Hinayana practitioner practices deeply loving kindness. The four immeasurables: immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable equanimity, immeasurable joy. Not only that, they do it to such an utmost extent that, if someone is a genuine, deep, advanced Hinayana practitioner, the practice of loving kindness is way greater than my current level of loving kindness and compassion, even though I would consider myself to be a Mahayana practitioner. So that's in general Hinayana and Mahayana. Now, historically, the word Hinayana was also associated more with certain philosophical schools within Buddhist philosophies. So you had Mahayana philosophy and Hinayana philosophies. Now, also the Buddhist world was divided into Mahayana countries and Hinayana countries. So Mahayana countries, Tibetan Buddhism is Mahayana Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, Japanese, Korean Buddhism, Mongolia, Himalayan region in general. There are areas, countries in which Mahayana Buddhism took root. And then we have Hinayana countries, such as Sri Lanka and Burma and Thailand, some parts of Vietnam. And so then the Hinayana tradition had also different strands. The Theravada tradition was one of them. Many of the Hinayana traditions are no longer in existence. The Theravada tradition is still in existence. So many people now prefer to use Theravada instead of Hinayana because, as I said, Hinayana, the small vehicle, might sound a little bit pejorative or kind of looking down on, like a smaller vehicle, although, Tibetan Buddhism doesn't view that as such. And so nowadays, many people speak of Theravada versus Mahayana, which is okay. So we, as Tibetan Buddhists, we practice Mahayana Buddhism, which means our goal is to attain the state of complete and perfect enlightenment, Buddhahood, for the sake of all living beings, in order to lead everyone to the state of liberation and enlightenment. And this path is based on compassion that recognizes that any state in which we and other living beings stay within cyclic existence, we will get constant suffering, dissatisfaction, pain, disappointment, and so forth. And out of this compassion, we think that not only I want to liberate myself from samsara, but mainly I want to liberate everyone else. Because all of us have Buddha nature, all of us have the potential to emerge from samsara. And so that's the Mahayana tradition. Now we can divide the Mahayana tradition again into two parts. One of them is the Sutra path, and the second is the Tantric path, Tantra, Sutra and Tantra. So we have Sutra Mahayana and Tantra Mahayana. Both of the Sutra Mahayana and Tantra Mahayana are based on Theravada, are based on Hinayana. So Hinayana Theravada is based on sutras, the teachings that the Buddha gave. Most of the things that we practice are Theravada practices, Hinayana practices, but we change our motivation. We alter our motivation. Rather than thinking that I'm doing it just so that I can become free from samsara, we think I'm putting all of these practices into action because I want to liberate everyone from samsara. I want to lead everyone to the state of enlightenment. And so Hinayana is teaching of the Buddha. Theravada consists of teachings that the Buddha gave. Then Sutra Mahayana include everything that was taught in the Theravada, in the Hinayana, plus practices of bodhicitta, the teachings on bodhicitta and the 6 perfections. And then when we spoke about the Lamrim, the steps of the path to enlightenment, is, as I said, is a way that Atisha reorganized the different strains of teachings that the Buddha gave and put them into a unified system of teachings, which are Mahayana teachings because they lead to the state of enlightenment. So when we think of Lamrim, we can think that it is a Mahayana presentation. It is a Mahayana presentation based on the sutras that the Buddha taught. They include Hinayana teachings, and they also include Mahayana teachings. All of them are based on teachings of the Buddha. So within the Mahayana, we have the Sutra path. But then also we have the Tantric path, which is also a Mahayana path or approach, techniques, technology, in which we develop another collection of tools, another techniques for even more quickly attaining the state of enlightenment for the sake of others. But in order to use the tantric techniques, the Mahayana tantric techniques, we need to have, as I said, a solid basis in the Sutra Mahayana techniques. So then, looking at the terminology that we use, Tsongkhapa said in the foundation of all good qualities, once we have trained in the common paths, then comes a time to enter into the Vajra vehicle. So let's look at the word vehicle to begin with. The word vehicle in Sanskrit is yana. So we have Mahayana, Hinayana, and Vajrayana. We also have, other terms, Paramitayana, Mantrayana. All of them include that word yana, which means a vehicle, a means of conveyance that gets us from our current state into the desired result, be it the state of liberation or the state of enlightenment. And so Mahayana, the great vehicle. Hinayana, the smaller vehicle. Again, small means in terms of our perspective, our motivation. And then we have the Vajrayana, the Vajra vehicle. Now, the word Vajra is used widely in Indian philosophy and tradition, and therefore also in Buddhist philosophy and tradition. And there is a certain meaning or significance to the word Vajra. Vajra in Tibetan is part of a construct, a term that refers to diamond, something that is indestructible. And often it is said that in Tibetan, a diamond is called doje palam. Doje is a Vajra, doje palam. And when Tibetans explain that in Tibetan language, they say that a diamond is something that can cut other things like glass, but glass cannot cut diamond. So in that sense, it has that feature of being indestructible, solid and indestructible. So Vajrayana leads, with speaking about the process by which we attain a state that is indestructible, the state of buddhahood. But also, Vajra sometimes refers to a method that is indestructible, developing a Vajra mind, a Vajra speech, a Vajra body, things which are indestructible. They're not going to recede back. They're not going to decline. We will always continue on and attend towards the state of enlightenment. So Vajrayana is a synonym for the practice of Tantra, or to the tantric people, Tantrayana. Then the word Tantra. The word Tantra in Tibetan is gyu, and the meaning of gyu is continuum. And the etymological explanation of the word Tantra refers to having a continuum of consciousness on the basis of which we will attain the result of Buddhahood. So the sutra path, if we look at one distinction between the sutra path and the tantric path, the sutra path employs techniques, graduated techniques, for developing a mind and making it better and better, greater and greater, wiser and wiser, and all along removing our obscurations, limitations, afflictions, and so forth. And then at the end of the sutra path, the Lamrim path, we will attain the result. We will become Buddha. But then the tantric path says, hold on, let's do it differently. Let's develop a somewhat other approach. If I look at the result, my own state of Buddhahood, and I try to bring it into the presence, I will see myself as Buddha. And if I see myself as Buddha, and I have the potential to become Buddha, so it's not like totally fantastical. If I adopt the mental attitude that I'm Buddha, what should I be doing? What would be the way that I view the world? What would be the relationship between myself and others? So as Buddha, for example, I will see everyone as being empty of inherent existence. I see everyone's potential of becoming Buddha. All the activities that I will perform would be activities that benefit other living beings. All the resources that I will be using, everything that I will be enjoying, will be resources that a Buddha enjoys, but with a Buddha mind, without attachment, without anger, without jealousy, without competitiveness. That all those resources would be a display, would be an understanding that they're empty of inherent existence, and yet the function, and I can use them for the benefit of others. So it is bringing the result into the current moment and progressing through that towards the state of enlightenment. So I'm connecting that with the word Tantra. The word Tantra means continuum. So on the basis of my continuum, my mental continuum, or my continuum as a human being, when I bring, as a sentient being, when I bring the result into the current moment, I will, on that basis, attain the state of enlightenment. That's the meaning of the word Tantra. Another equivalence of, another synonym for Tantra is the secret mantra. So we know we are familiar with the word mantra. We take that often to mean a certain recitation. We recite mantras, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Vajrasattva Hum, Om Vajrasattva Samaya, Manupalaya, and so forth. And so the word mantra, when it is explained, when we break it down in Sanskrit into its etymological components, the syllables, man is mind, and tra means protection. So mantra provides us with tools to protect our mind. If I connect it with what I said before about Tantra, it is bringing the result into the present, onto the path. We see ourselves as an enlightened being, as a certain deity. It sounds a little bit kind of ridiculous, doesn't it? I spoke before about idol worshipping, thinking that this whole tantric thing is a little bit of voodoo, idol worshipping. I see myself as just an ordinary sentient being. Not only I see myself as an ordinary sentient being, I wholeheartedly believe that I'm an ordinary being, that I'm Kartsön, I'm a monk, I'm a man, I was born in Israel, I have certain features. These are what we call ordinary appearances. And I also hold on to myself as being ordinary. And so long as I totally believe that I'm an ordinary being and I cling to that forcefully, I would not be able to see myself as a complete Buddha, something that is instrumental for the practice of Tantra. And so I want to connect that with the word mantra, mental protection. What do I need to protect my mind from? I need to protect my mind from those ordinary appearances and also completely believing that I'm ordinary. So the mantra vehicle, the vehicle of secret mantra, teaches us techniques for stopping ordinary appearances and also believing, clinging that those ordinary appearances are true. If I manage to do that, and there are techniques for doing that, and we will speak about those techniques in the following weeks, I will be able then to use the tantric path, bringing the result into the path, and to expedite my progression along the steps of the path to enlightenment. So we have Mahayana, which consists of Sutra Mahayana and Tantra Mahayana. Tantra is synonymous with mantra, the mantra vehicle, and with the Vajrayana, the Vajra vehicle. So these are lots of terms. And it might give you a headache. I see Matt clasping his head or face. It might give you a headache. It might be overwhelming. And it's okay, these are the tantric teachings are considered to be of the most complicated teachings, not only to get our head around, but also putting it into practice. There's so many things that we need to do, laying out the foundation for progression. And so even if we don't understand everything now, or it's too much, it's okay. We don't have to get everything now. After all, it's just an introduction to Tantra here that we're looking at. So whatever we can hold on to at the moment, that's okay. And if it's too difficult, we put it aside, put it on the back burner for the time being, and thinking that what I need to do now, what I need to remember now, is that Tantra is a way of attaining the state of enlightenment, and therefore it is part of the Mahayana tradition, Mahayana path. And in order to practice Tantra well, I need to develop well the common paths, the Lamrim, to continue to meditate on the Lamrim. Particularly what I need to focus on, what I need to work on is developing renunciation, bodhicitta, and a better understanding of emptiness. So I think that it was a long answer to Susan's question, and I think that there are maybe some things which I failed to answer, and maybe some things which gave rise to more questions and more doubts. And so it's good. It's good that we have doubts. It's good that not everything is crystal clear, because we now have some more impetus, some more drive to continue to invest time in trying to figure out what's this whole tantric thing is about, so that in the future, if we have an opportunity and the facility to enrich our practice also with tantric techniques, we'd be able to do that. And so I think that we are at the end of this session. Have you got any last question or query before we leave it here for today?
I just want to say thank you. That really helped me to understand, to be able to follow what you were talking about, to know the relations of those terms to each other and how they distinguish and fit into each other. Thank you so much. That was beautifully explained.
Thank you. I think that, the tantric path is so rich and also can be complicated. And as I said at the beginning of this session, it's a little bit challenging to know how to pitch it, not to say too much, but also not to leave it too vague. So we will work on it together in the next few weeks, so that we'll not get too confused, but also we have enough basic information at our fingertips, so that later on we'll be able to make informed decisions about our spiritual practice. All right. Thank you very much for joining us today. First of all, thank you very much for the people of Ven.Ven that have created this wonderful platform for sharing the teachings of the Buddha. And there are a few people that are busy behind the scene in making this possible. Shela, first and foremost, but also Venerable Dundu, and all the other people that are helping and supporting this session or this set of teachings or other activities within Ven.Ven ring and also the FBMT ring. May we be able to continue to share this together. We will dedicate whatever virtue we have collected together in this session. First of all, for the flourishing of not only bodhicitta, but we can also think of the things that support the flourishing of bodhicitta: renunciation, the sense of the path of those of the small scope, of the medium scope, and the great scope in our own mind stream, so that we'd be able to benefit not only ourselves, but limitless sentient beings in the future. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta, that is not a reason, arise and grow. And that which is a reason not diminish, but increase more and more. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, might quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha. Might quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha, depending on the sutra path, but also depending on the tantric path, so that I will lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. And since His Holiness the Dalai Lama had his 91st birthday yesterday, we will dedicate for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but also we can include all other teachers that we are connected with within the FBMT and outside of the FBMT. May they live a long life and all the activities flourish. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful in residence in Vyasa, please remain until samsara ends. So thank you very much, people. It was a pleasure seeing you today. Have a good night. And I will have a good rest of the day. It's a beautiful sunny day in Queensland in Australia. So see you next time. Next week, I'll be seeing you from Sydney, by the way, the big city, Sin City. So brace yourself.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Thank